We are live. Hi,
Yay!
everyone. I'm Kalen Williamson. I invited my friend Ansley Ashe to talk with me today about St. Patrick's Day, which we're celebrating, and Women's International Month. And in honor of both, because some of my characters are inspired um, by the Irish and are strong women, we'll be going over suspicious men and women's intuition. So I'll let Ansley introduce herself really quick.
Hi, I'm Ansley Ashe of Ansley Ashe Mysteries. I tend to write. All of my investigators are females, strong female leads. So that's Kaylin and I are just buddies, and we like these are our rando conversations at like 1 o'clock in the morning, but we're bringing them to you live today, to talk about International Women's Month. So, all right.
Yeah, so like Ansley said, she does mystery. I tend to do literary and women's fiction, if you don't already know. This is our second live, so welcome. But yeah, to jump right into it, the two characters I have that are Irish are Clover from Clover a Fairy Tale, which is not yet published in production, inspired by Tristan and Isolde, and kind of also by Dorian Gray, which is crazy. I did not realize how Irish that story was, even though I called her Clover. And her love interest is Tristan, who is a great guy, but very suspicious guy living in a gothic mansion. We don't know if he's like a killer or not a killer. Suspicious. And Marnie, who's American, but she falls for a guy named Luke, who's a guy who hangs out in parking lots from Ireland here in LA to become a great actor, but he ended up being the king of commercials, hanging around grocery store parking lots. So those were my two intros into it. And yeah, so it has a lot of women's intuition because my characters have to wonder, how much can they trust these guys? How much can you trust a guy who's like, live in my big mansion with me? Is there blood everywhere? Don't even like worry about it. It's
Don't
fine.
worry about that. Don't worry about that at all. Yeah, no, Clover. By virtue of being your best friend and like reading the early drafts of this story, I cannot wait for you to finish this story and get this out to people, because like it is spooky and mysterious and interesting. And Clover thinks she's, for a hot minute, going crazy, but is she crazy in love with him? Is he just suspicious? What is he? Is he a good guy? I don't know. And like you're like, oh my gosh, Clover, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And then she does, and Tristan's not. I don't know. I won't spoil what Tristan is, but Tristan is not all that he seems, but he's not all that bad. Maybe it's in some parts, but he's an interesting character. He's a very
Right.
interesting character.
I always root for the bad guy, you know. Like I like Dexter and was like, that seems like a reasonable. He's only killing the bad ones. It's fine.
I
And
mean,
then
listen, because you can't change the serial killer. Everybody knows serial killers are born, not made, right? Yeah, it's a
right.
hilarious. I love Dexter.
So and Ansley actually did read about Marnie and Luke, which at least is finished, so be seeing them a little bit sooner than Clover. And trusting her intuition. Being like, can I trust this guy as I leave the grocery store parking lot to a wooded, strange area with no witnesses? This
What?
seems
Don't
safe.
act suspicious, right? Yeah, like whatever. Don't
I
be
love that
suspicious.
story because there actually is a suspicious man in there, and I won't give it away which one is worse. Some people think they're both bad. Some people are like, well, I have my favorite. I will not give it away. But Ansley wrote about a character called Allison, who I believe you said she also kind of has an attached link to the Irish with her last name.
Right. So she's born Allison McLean. And then like as the story goes on, so like she's Allison Armstrong. So she's Allison McLean Armstrong Mechanic. By the time you meet her, she's on her second husband. But yeah, so this is set classically set in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And having grown up in the Blue Ridge, well, near the Blue Ridge Mountains, I wouldn't say Charlotte is in Blue Ridge Mountains, but it's like right there at the base of the Blue Ridge Mountains. My phone keeps wanting to shut off for some reason. It's got plenty of battery. So like if I disappear, I'm sorry, guys. Um It's just the way my life goes. I'm just a hot mess 24/7. Yeah, so I grew up in Charlotte. I was very inspired, but I went to school at Western Carolina University when I was in college. And so I'm very familiar with Blue Ridge Mountains, very familiar with that culture. There's, of course, a beautiful place. And their history is that they are settled by the Scots Irish. So Allison has McLean as a last name, which can be interpreted as either Scottish or Irish. She's got flaming red hair. Does that sound curly, flaming red hair? She's kind of really spunky. She in like yeah. So she's just this really spunky girl who, she's the daughter of a cop and a politician, and the niece of a cop, and the widow of a cop. Not giving anything away there. First husband died under tragic circumstances. So yeah, you know she's a girl. She's a girl who like takes on her world. I think that's maybe the thing that I think most of, like when I think of a strong woman, is when a problem comes at you, how do you react? Do you go cry? Depends on what the situation is, right? And then what do you do? Do you wait for something to happen? Are you, oh my gosh, I was so mad the other day. But are you what I call manified, right? You're gonna wait for your man to make your decision. No female protagonist in my series will ever be manified. No, 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 no. That is not what their men are here for. Their men are here to love and support them. And if they cannot be on board with that, they're going to go bye, bye, bye.
See, and it's funny because, like, I wouldn't say that either Tristan or Luke make decisions for Marnie or Clover. I think they just make them offers. And even one of my critique partners is like, a lot of your guys just like come into their lives to change their life. And I was like, well, yeah, because why else would you invite them in your life if they're not going to be life changing? Who wants to be bored? That's their job, is to challenge you and make you think, oh, this is new, this is different. I like a good challenging guy. I think you see that actually a lot. And my women,
It makes them really well, but I mean, like you're writing women's fiction and you're writing literary fiction, right? So like that dynamic between the characters, I think, is very different than it is in mystery, where like the challenge in mystery is to take a character who has to fit the plot, right? Like you have to fit the thing that's going forward in the plot and make it a unique character with their own desires and their own, but it still has to make the plot mesh together. Because if you lose a clue, your readers are like, no, that wasn't fair. You did this wrong. You silly writer. And we
oh
can't
yeah,
have it.
I
We can't have that. So, so I think like you having like characters that come in and that challenge them, and like sometimes, like yeah, Allison has like challenges or whatever, but the men in Allison's life are there as her partner. They're there to help her reduce her load, right? And so like that's their main function, and they're there to they're supporting characters because they're supposed to be supportive. So when they challenge Allison, it is in a good way. It's in a positive way, or supposedly, I don't know. But those of you who read the Big Intersection, Joe gets her second husband, Joe gets into quite a bit of mess, thinking he can solve her problems for her, and he's just wrong. You know what I mean? Like, which
always a flaw there. Yeah. One of my critique partners wanted Marnie to be more abrasive, and I was like, that is not who she is. You will just have to leave with
I didn't understand that feedback that you got either. I loved
right.
money. She's like,
She's
oh, whatever.
she's not, but I like how brave she ended up being. Where it was like, ooh, but not too brave, because I don't like to break character. Where like they learn a lesson and they become a different person. Like I keep them really true to themselves. A lesson can only change you so much as a person. Like I changed this much. I didn't become a new entity.
Are
And
you
it's so
changing this much or are you changing this much? Well, I think it also depends on what the age of that character is, right? Because, like, obviously, if you have a child character, changing that
mm,
person, like completely, there are things that happen in people's childhoods and very early adulthoods that do pivot that character and do make them change. But I mean, like, I write mystery, right? So, like, yes, I write about those moments in people's lives, but more what I do is, but like we meet them after that change. So like you're going to see that that's maybe the reason for the change, but you're going to see more the result of the change than any of them beforehand. And the only reason why I would show you beforehand is to break your heart. Like, no.
Yeah, I don't
Well,
know a lot of children
if
running
it's a
around.
positive change, I don't know. If it's a positive change, maybe to say like, "Yeah, go you. You really overcame something." I mean, there are times that I do that, but yeah, no, mostly it's like if you're gonna see it, if you have a messed up character, I'm gonna
So
show you.
now that I think of it, a lot of the guys in my stories are very nefarious. Clover, everywhere she turns, is a nefarious, suspicious man. You gotta figure out who the evil one is. And Marnie has the same problem. Which one is going to kill her? We don't know. Like, it could be either one. Can she escape? Unsure. And I don't think I realized, like, yeah, they're very nefarious figures where the woman has to figure it out. That's not inspired by online dating at all. Like, it's
Well, I mean, like summoning a stranger into your dating life, I am so old as a person. Like this was a thing that was frowned upon. It's like, no, 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 not like you need to know who they are. You need to meet them in like some sort of whatever way and like whatever. And we thought of back in my day, like when I was growing up, like when I was a child, it was definitely like, oh, did you put an ad in the classified saying you were looking for a relationship? And we would laugh at those people, but I mean, like, obviously people did it because they weren't. And then online dating became a thing, and that became the way like everybody met each other. And it's like, oh, that's
I
interesting.
remember as a child, like that white van of like, do not trust the people of the internet. They have a white van and they're gonna kidnap you with it. I'm surprised there's no white van in my stories. There's a purple trailer.
Trailer. Wait, I'm like, yeah, but if you were writing mystery, you'd have to go like the whole thing, right? It's the white van with the puppy and the candy, right? Like, you got to set that up. And like everybody's like, oh, like white van. Well, is that a red herring? White van, puppy, candy. Like, oh, this is our bad guy. Now we have to follow the white van to figure out who our bad guy is. Which one of our suspects is driving the white van? We don't know. It's got tinted windows. That's the point of tinted windows, right?
Right. In my stories, you gotta guess if the man in the van is good or evil. Play with your minds. He could be the hero, suspiciously with candy for some reason, or the villain who's just unoriginal. And I think I like that. I like to play with that dynamic. It's a lot of fun. I was shocked last night. We did prep, dear people of the internet. We did talk about this, so it wouldn't just seem like some random thing.
Just
I
random
was
conversations.
I was shocked by how inspired by the Irish I was because I told you Tristan and Isolde, and Dorian Gray both inspired Clover, and I didn't expect it. And I was like, oh, I didn't even think about them both being Irish. I don't know why, but Tristan was inspired by Dorian Gray, and then ended up a completely different character. He has nothing. You're gonna be like Dorian Gray. Where did you get that from?
Where did you get that
And
from?
Tristan and Isolde. Again, they're a dramatic tragedy, and my story is not that dramatic. So it's just interesting where inspiration will take you. And it kind of took me on a journey that's never close to the original story. I'm always like way over because sometimes I worry, I don't know if you do, about like copyright, like, oh my God, am I copying too much? But I go so unhinged in my own direction, it never ends up that close. So, and I apologize, I'm surprising you with this question, but have you ever had an idea, an inspiration, and then just completely went left
Yeah,
field?
so so ironically, I was having this conversation with my friend Jen Bauer, and so most of my inspiration does come from like little real life moments. So I'm more inspired by like the stuff that happens in real life. Um, which like I got a great story from one of my buddies the other day, and that is going in my November my novel in November. Like I have notes on this. Um, so like yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I guess I borrow less. Okay, so when I was writing in romance, you do your romance, right? Enemies to lovers, friends to lovers, I don't know, love at first sight, arranged marriage, like marriage of convenience, right? Like all of those things. There are all of these tropes. There's these overarching stories, right? Your Romeo and Juliet, like you're not so your forbidden love, right? Like those are, and so like I did traffic, and was inspired by some of those, and like I had to think about things, and I did worry a little bit about copyright then. In mystery, I think it's different because I think if I become inspired by, say, Agatha Christie, I mean, everybody's already read her stuff. So, like, I'm kind of spoiled the end for you, and I think that's not as much fun for my reader, right? Like, and not that I'm like trying to be like overly original, but like the thing I like most about mysteries, like, because I write puzzle mysteries. I write puzzle mysteries because I read puzzle mysteries, right? And I don't have anything against the other things, but like that is what I loved most to read growing up. That is what I still enjoy reading the most as an adult, is that race between me and the detective, the clues that are on the page and that author. And has the author given me a fair run for my money? Hope I give my readers that. And, and have I outsmarted my author in the end? And sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. And like I was reading something the other day. My favorite author um, was once tested with an IQ of over 170. So like being outsmarted by somebody with an IQ that high, like obviously a thing. So like I don't hold a grudge against somebody smarter than me. Well, I don't know. I've never really had my IQ tested, so but I don't think I'm 170. No, I'm not that arrogant. Um, but yeah, like being outsmarted by somebody smarter than me, kind of not a bad thing, but just the way that kind of is, the way that that rolls.
Yeah, I think I just get inspired by like a sliver of something and then run with it. So I liked the luxuriousness, the beautifulness of Dorian's selfishness, I think, in some ways, in Oscar Wilde, and the indulgence there. And so the original story had like a beautiful mansion and a lot of indulgence. And I don't think I took it all out, but I made it so much sweeter and so much nicer. Even at Tristan's worst, when he's not a great person, he's still a little bit nicer than Dorian
And
Gray,
Dorian,
who is just sin personified, literally, in the story, or his painting is.
well, yeah, his painting becomes, and not only that, but and they're like, you wonder what's going on. No, you don't. Like, I don't know. I don't know why it was listed. So I read it last year because I was trying to do, and failed. Try to do a 24 banned books in 2024. I was doing a challenge. I was trying to read all mysteries. Dorian Gray is one of the mysteries that came up. And I read it and I was like,
Yeah.
I
Where's
don't
the
know if
mystery? No one like Sybil Vane, like speaking of, International Women's Month, Sybil Vane wasn't treated with respect at all. She's like known for how badly Oscar just screwed her over and was like, you can die because he's not interested in you. Spoiler, if you go
no,
and read this story. Um, but it's not a mystery that Dorian is evil. And I don't think the Yellow Book is really mysterious either. It's just kind of
and
like,
it's like, I don't know. Like I had a literary critic, or one of my friends who is a writer, um, one of my friends who's a writer, who's like, well, it's like what's happening and how is he managing to stay that young? And I was like, that's a literary device. That's not. I just don't personally
so
think of it as a mystery.
do you also think it's when we're reading it too? Like, to be fair, this is an iconic story that I saw in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Just we know Dorian, we know the painting, we know whatever. I wonder if it was brand new. Like, if I lived in Oscar's time, if it really would be a mystery of like what's going to happen. Whereas Dorian Gray has permeated our lives so much. I don't think you ever have to pick up this book. I think I only read it once a very long time ago, and it's just so part of our culture. I wonder if in his time, maybe that's why they called it a mystery, because it would have been more mysterious before it was
And
everywhere.
yeah, like if you pick up the book brand new and you have like no cultural reference to it, yeah, I think maybe that's fair. I don't know. Like I wrestled with that when I was reading it, right? But I was like, okay, well, like obviously I know how this ends. Because like Dorian Gray has permeated my culture. So like I know what the plot twist is gonna be. I was like, but at the same time I felt like if you don't see this coming, I think it's not a mystery. I think it's written the golden age of mystery comes afterwards, right? Agatha Christie and what it takes to be a mystery novel, like and that P.D. Woodhouse, and that like G.K. Chesterton and all of those. That's the West Wembley murders and
That's
Father,
true because
right?
like mystery
And those
wasn't
all
as
came like,
established in
right,
Oscar's time either.
right, and that came later in the 1920s and 1930s. As the golden age of mystery is picking up, and like they have the mystery club, right? and it's kind of, and we think of it as like ushered in during Oscar Wilde's time because Sherlock Holmes is so iconic, but the Sherlock Holmes books don't adhere as strictly as like say the Edgar Allan Poe's do, because those were all, he just wrote a series of short stories about like
Yeah.
logical reasoning, right? And so like he had a detective because he thought logical reasoning, and Arthur Conan Doyle, creates Sherlock Holmes because he wants a scientific approach to solving crime. So like that's what those books were about. But they're not really the puzzle to engage the reader. It's what the author had to say about the world. And Sherlock Holmes was brilliant. Conan Doyle was brilliant because his books are like one half Western or adventure novel. Like this used to be a thing, like adventure novel, which like morphs into like comic books later on. But it's like adventure story, and then it's a little bit of like the what's going on here, what's the mystery, what's
See,
the
I have
crime.
to say I am with the Irish on this one, and just like the English can jump off a cliff on this day with their nefarious crimes of the past.
Yeah,
And so I have never read the original Sherlock Holmes because he was super racist too. And I'm like, we'll watch the renditions. As you and I talked in the last one, I'd rather have a Joan Watson who's Asian than the racist
Ricky Lou is
Conan
fantastic. I mean,
Doyle.
and I just thought that was, but again, goes back, like we talked so much about strong women, like that was also a strong woman character,
Right.
making John Watson Jones. And I mean, I think Joan, I think, and Watson as a character, the original character is like an everyman, and he's definitely not stupid. He's smart enough, and so we see like this educated guy through him, and that, but it's his ordinariness that makes Sherlock great, right? And I think the fact that he was a doctor wasn't, and I think having Joan be smarter and gutsier than the original John
I
Watson, that she's
I
more.
do like a gutsy woman who like, and she was really brave. Um yeah. And to be fair, we were talking about Oscar. He does one thing I learned about Irish tales. I don't know how many you've read. They're known as storytellers, but they have a lot of details. I read the book Ireland by, I think his name is like Robert Delaney or something, and it's like the
Okay.
story of Ireland, and like the amount of details, and I'll be totally honest, sometimes it's too much for me. Like very, I don't know if you call it literary because it doesn't always, Oscar comes off as literary because he's older and it was a stream of consciousness book where it's just like endlessly. I felt he could have cut like 50 pages from that book, to be honest. He kept going on and on. But I realized that is a very sorry for the phone moves. That is a very Irish tradition of having like detailed long tales that you're like, okay, maybe like a little bit faster. But that's actually more American in tradition. And I was like, well, that's interesting. Um
It maybe explains though why Gone with the Wind is so long, right?
did an Irish person write it?
No, Margaret Mitchell's, her characters are all Irish, and like Scarlett
Oh.
Donald is Irish, so she had quite a bit of Irish history in her, and so yes, and her aunt, who the character Melanie Hamilton is based on, was a nun. So like it's like, okay, so the girl who stole Ashley from Scarlet was literally based on a nun, and it's like, oh, we're supposed to think Melanie's a really great character. So I don't know, but yeah, I do think maybe it's a really long book and a really long movie, and it does have a lot of detail in it, and it does talk about things. So I don't know. The Irish love themselves a lost cause. They love themselves a fight. Yeah, and they're a ton of fun, and they love themselves like just some, and I just love that St.
Yeah.
Patrick's Day is a tradition, in
Well,
America.
and they had such an influence on us because I come from New England, and like it's the Irish and the Italians when I was growing up that affected a lot of that culture. And we talked last night, Boston has a huge St. Patrick's Day celebration as well as Savannah. So it's interesting how much impact that they've had on us. I think
So,
sometimes people in Ireland don't realize the impact
right.
that the immigrants had because we'll say like Irish American or something, and they're like, what are you talking about? And it's like, America's a melting pot, can't go back. That's what we are. And so the Irish is part of it, along with the Italian and the
Yeah, and
Catholics.
I think St. Patrick's Day was kind of this wacky thing where I wore green or else I would get pinched when I was growing up. And then the first year, no, but it was. That's like what it was. Like growing up in Charlotte, there's this Scots Irish tradition or whatever. And then the first year we got married, we moved from Charlotte to Savannah, my husband and I spent, and that's the only St. Patrick's Day I spent in Savannah. And it's just there are parades. They honor Revolutionary heroes, like they go all the way back, you know. So like Savannah is an interesting town, and it has, I think, the second largest St. Patrick's Day celebration in America, behind only Boston. And between the two of them, those are the largest St. Patrick's Day celebrations outside of Ireland. Like only the Irish are more St. Patrick's Day than us. And I wouldn't be surprised, like, if you were in Ireland, there are towns in Ireland that are like, I don't know what you're talking about, St. Patrick's Day, whatever.
That would be interesting. Um, yeah, and I like the passion of the Irish. I will say the stories can be a bit rambling, but I love the passion. That's what I loved about Tristan and Isolde, because while Shakespeare did his whole poison spiel, I think Tristan and Isolde really captured my heart more, of just like these souls who fell in love and it did not work out, but they were soulmates and they left this plane together. And I do, I'm a soulmate girl in my writing. I love it. Even though I don't really do a lot of romance, I do more women's fiction than romance. I do love a soulmate. And I just realized when I was talking to you last night, even though The Secret of Happy Couples is not inspired by Tristan and Isolde, I think when someone asks, like, what is your point with Beau and his mysterious bride, which I won't give that away.
Dropping this, like, you can go on Amazon and pick these up today, but you can't. It's coming soon, I promise.
I
Like,
know, right? Oh my
we're
goodness.
working this
And so,
collection right now, okay? It'll be out soon.
we are. I'm writing this, and that's what's crazy is we're talking about it as we're writing it, not as I am publishing it. Ans is a little bit better than me. You can pick up The Big Intersection, and if you want to pick up Tapestry, which I'm trying to think, like, is there anything Irish in Tapestry? I don't know that there's anything Irish, but you can pick it up. You want stories about characters in their tumultuous 20s acting wild.
Benno and what's the
Benno and
girl?
Annabelle.
Annabelle, yeah. Yeah, you have soulmates in there.
I
You got
do. They are soulmates in their own castle. I made up a little world for them that is very European inspired for those two. A very cute world for those couple of people that I love Benno. He was so shy and so cute. I will spoiler alert in that he is not evil. When I first started writing, I didn't have as many nefarious men hanging around as I do now.
Well, it was a short story, and you had, like, only a little bit to accomplish, and you had, like, the magic to create with the soulmates, so, like,
Oh, that's
it
right.
was a different situation, I think.
And that's very Irish is magic because they're magical people, at least in their fables and fairy tales.
Some
So
fae, some leprechauns.
right, they hate the leprechauns and people ask them all the time. And Lucky Charms is so American, but you just think Irish because we go off to that. The clover. Um, yeah, I have a soulmate match. And so I always think of Tristan and Isolde bound together for life. And that's where the soulmates came from in The Secret to Happy Couples versus the companionship couples. Um, so yeah, I'm surprised. I didn't realize how much the Irish had permeated my little brain until we talked. And I was
Well,
like,
you did grow up in New England, you know, which, like, famous, like, well, it's called New England, but we're gonna reject all that because, like, the English are like, whatever, you know, and so what you got from New England is a little bit of American Gothic, a lot of Irish, a lot of Italian, and they're like,
right.
nothing freaking English, okay? We
No
chucked that
beans on
tea into
toast.
the harbor in 17 whatever, 1770 whatever, and we were done with the English at that point. And there's nothing English about that. We have an English accent.
That is so funny. That is so accurate too. Even New York used to be New Amsterdam. We're just like
Yeah.
British. Who now? We'll take any culture, even the nefarious Dutch over the English. And it's
Well,
only the names, like Warwick and like all of that stuff. That's where you kind of see more of the English. And like I've been out of New England too long. I'm not going to say the words right, but all our cities, like Worcester and like, and that's New England. That's not just Rhode Island. That's Boston, or
You
Massachusetts
can hear
rather.
Kalen when she gets mad. Her New England accent comes out when she gets mad. Like when she's happy, she sounds exactly like what she is. Like when she's angry, it's like, oh no, I grew up in New England and you're gonna deal with my New England accent. But when she's happy, it's like, oh, did mom move you when you were a kid down to like sunny the South? And then she sounds just a tiny bit like a Southern belle, you know? So
Oh, that's funny. I never thought of myself sounding Southern, but I've lived here for a long time.
yeah.
So that's interesting. But yeah, my roots are my roots. So but it's interesting you mentioned being pinched. I don't I did grow up with that. I don't know if they do that here, but I did grow up with like you wear green, we wore green, you're like, oh my god, what day is it? You have to wear green. I even
I,
did green eyeliner.
I don't have green eyeliner. I think it was like when I grew up, it was like the day and the school day that the boys, like they were like
Ugh.
anxious to like punch people and like just be like little.
I'm sad I left New England too early to really celebrate St. Patrick's Day Boston style.
With your
But it was
lager,
yeah, well, just everything's green. It's so fun. We loved a good parade up there. And it's really fun to have all the bakeries participate. And then what was that show? Rizzoli and Isles. It reminds me a little bit of home sometimes. I miss the accent. That show did not have much of the accent in it.
it did
And I
not.
do miss the accent,
But
the Boston
I mean, yeah, I can't do a Boston accent for love or money. Like I just sound weird doing it. But I mean, like we are more like our generation, my generation, your generation, losing those regional accents. More like it's flattening out and becoming more Midwestern, and everybody's like, we're gonna speak properly. And I don't know how much that like TV and the internet did that to us, but it has.
when there's a movie that reminds me of my old accent, or even like there was a lifestyle, there was like a wild New England lifestyle with like the crazy girl, which I'm not saying that women are crazy. And it is kind of unhealthy to burn all your boyfriend's things. I'm not like we should do that, but I think some of my stories you can tell like that was my inspiration. I kind of like the wild in women so much. So while I think those relationships are toxic and entirely those men's faults, it's Marky Mark's fault. Blame him. Um, in some of the movies he's been in lately. But it reminds me so much of home. Just having the girl like scream out the window and then like shove it out there in the Boston accent and like the wild passion of it, like the screaming. And it's been a while. But it does. Movies like that remind me, but they're few and far in between. They're not like every day. And then I won't even mention it, but there are some like even offensive things that I remember from back in the day where I'm like, yeah, but it's home. You have that like culture baked into you. Uh, and so when I see it in movies, I'm like, oh, but you're right because not many people do the accent because I think Matt Damon and Ben Affleck are also from the area and they don't do it too often and you don't see it. And I think Don Juan took place in Boston and he had the accent. What's his name? Joseph Gordon Levitt. Um, Mark Wahlberg occasionally. He's from Boston too, right? I like how this is Irish Day and became Boston Day really fast.
It's Irish Day, but Boston, Ireland. I don't know. Well, it's like this. You and I are not like I'm a history buff, but I don't know the history of Ireland as well as I know the history of like other places.
If you read the Robert Delaney Ireland book, you will learn more. Um, from a little bit from St.
I like
Patrick's
how
to
she's
the
giving me a book rack as if like I don't have like a list of like the next 100 books I'm going to
it's
read and
it's
trying to
long. You're gonna
squeeze
want
them
to read
together.
it in between your other books, like a chapter at a time, because he breaks up the history of Ireland into stories, but like they're long stories, and it goes back all the way to like I think I'm gonna misquote it. It's been many years, many years, viewer, since I have read this. I want to say like Celtics. Were they in Ireland? I remember stones. They built a stone temple in the book that I remember because I was like, he took pages to describe the stone temple. And I was like, okay, you built a stone temple. I'm very proud of you. Can we move on? But that has a little bit of Irish history. But like you, I read stuff, but my poor memory does not retain all the stuff I'm meant to remember about St. Patrick and the stones and the history. And I think I just love stories. So the storytelling aspect of sitting around the fire, I guess. And again, I'm reading. This is through literature. This is through stories of telling stories to your family and loved ones in Ireland around the fire, the bar, the something, and just telling a tale in beautiful detail, which we don't really do. Like, we'll tell a story, but we're not including too many details. We're not capturing our listener quite the way they describe in that book and in the culture,
Well, we don't sit around fires and tell stories anymore, right? Like when we
right?
moved
And
to
that could
visual
have been
medium, I think when we moved to TV, um, because like movies were a theater experience, right? And so like you live theater, and then you had like the photo theater, as I think of like cinema, right? So like movies were its own thing, but the culture of storytelling took place in your car or at home with the radio. And I think like really the advent of TV, especially as it started to pick up steam in the 1960s, I think that really replaced like just sitting around and telling stories.
yeah.
And I think I tell a story worse than my dad tells a story, and my dad probably told a story worse than some of the people from like his father's generation. So I think like I'm not saying there aren't great storytellers in my generation, but I'm saying like it's
It's
also a
not
skill.
as common. I don't think people would sit around and listen to you. They probably be like, why have you ever move on? Oh my goodness. I shouldn't bring up the English again. It reminds me of Charles Dickens' story, though, that ornament story. I forget the name of it. It's like Christmas tree or something. And you just list ornaments. You're like,
Oh
there needs to be
God.
a plot in a story,
It needs to
Dickens.
go somewhere. It needs to do something. People need to do things,
Right?
right?
And it's like, how bored are you where you're just reading a list of ornaments? I just thought there would be a plot, and then I got to the end of the story. He just listed the ornaments on a Christmas tree. And I was like, lesson learned. They were a bit bored back in the day.
Apparently,
Um,
there's like everything that was important and fun.
right. Oh my goodness. It's nice to sit and relax and read, though. I think I get distracted a lot. I play those little spade games, and over the weekend, I sat and I read, and you're like, that's nice. I also lost the internet, so it encouraged me. I was like, well, then I'm not meant to work. There's no internet. So it is nice to slow down, but I don't think I do it enough. Um,
Yeah, I think like really like making some time to do that. So today is a great day to slow down because it is St. Patrick's Day. It's gonna be 5 o'clock in like 3 hours here. You have less time. You have less time to wait until it's like 5 o'clock to get your lager.
right. Yeah. I don't think there's any places around here that do that, but hopefully one day you and I can go somewhere and celebrate in style. It also reminds me of How I Met Your Mother had a St. Patrick's Day episode, and we'll have to talk about that another time. I could deep dive into that
Next year.
episode,
Next year. Yeah.
right?
Next year when we
Uh,
like figure out what we're doing.
well, actually, talking to you last night and doing this, I think I have like 3, 4, 5 years worth of just Irish things. So I kind of kept this contained. But I have one Irish subject I can bring up that makes more sense when the collection is released than right now. And so that can be next year. And then one year we can dissect How I Met Your Mother, and maybe like another St. Patrick's Day episode if I can find another one. But like there's so much. I'm just so much more Irish than I thought. But
They need to have this thing.
right. But yes, these are stories about suspicious men, women's intuition, strong women. So happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone, and happy International Women's Month.
Find a
And
4-leaf clover, make a wish.
yes, definitely. I always wanted to find one as a child, and I keep finding 3-leaf clovers, and like I could never find the 4-leaf, and I'd always be next to the person who found it, and I'm like,
Oh, that sucks. All right, so
"Where's
like
it?"
yeah, my neighborhood used to be a farm, and so there was white clover like literally everywhere, all over my neighborhood. So I found a few growing up, but I'm rare, but I found a few, like because the patches of clover would grow in the yard. So yeah, but I live too far north to find like I have to make my own clovers because the clover isn't out today yet. So because it's too cold up here in Illinois. It's cold today. It was
Oh,
70 on
it's a little chilly
Friday.
here. It was like 75 yesterday, and now it's like 50. So it chilled down here just a tad. But yeah. And Ansley is going to sew me clovers, or knit me rather, clovers for Clover that she was supposed to do in 2020. And we're in 2025. So I'll call you out on live. So then we will witness these clovers when they're done.
I'm sorry. I do. I really do. Like, I even have it out. Like, it's out. It's sitting on my dresser behind me here. I have it out. I'm like, it's ready to go to like start like crocheting them, and I don't ever remember to pick it up. I'm like,
At this
and it's
point, I might finish the book and sell
before
it
you
before
finish.
you do this.
That's okay. That's the thing. Leave a comment in down below if you've made it this long. Leave a comment for us. Tell us who do you think is going to finish their clovers first. So Kalen and her story about clover, or Melanie and the four-leaf clovers. Melanie is supposed to crochet for Kalen. So take your poison.
And that's all for today. Join us. It'll be my birthday, March 31st, when we're back with another episode. And I would announce what it would be about, but I actually have two different topics and I have not really decided. And so either it'll be something I referenced in the last post, which was about how Ansley and I create stories, or I'm thinking of working on a mystery. And so if I do that, maybe we'll have a mystery topic. So
Ansley is going to be writing a novella like for April. So like maybe we'll have things to talk about.
we will. So join us then. That's March 31st. And see you then. Bye.
Bye.